Today, we're going to tackle a really heavy topic, one of the most destructive regimes of the 20th century. And the really scary part, it didn't come to power in a violent coup. It rose up through the ballot box and through political deal-making. This isn't just a history lesson, it's a look at just how fragile democracy can be.
It's a question that, honestly, should keep us all up at night. How does a modern country, a nation with a democratic constitution, just hand over the keys to a dictatorship? Well, that's exactly what we're going to try and understand.
You see, the rise of Hitler wasn't some single sudden event. It was more like a chain reaction, a series of dominoes falling, one right after the other. And each one pushed Germany a little further from democracy and a little closer to tyranny. And to see how it all started, we have to go back to the end of the First World War.
Okay, so, domino number one, the peace that ended World War I. For Germany, this wasn't really a peace treaty at all. It was a national humiliation, one that would poison the country's politics for decades. Just look at these terms. They are absolutely staggering. Imagine your country losing a huge chunk of its most resource-rich land. But that war guilt clause, that was a really bitter pill to swallow. It forced Germany to take all the blame for a war that had devastated the entire globe. Add to that crippling financial payments and a tiny, restricted military, and you have a perfect recipe for deep, lasting national resentment.
So what did this mean? It meant Germany's first real attempt at democracy, the Weimar Republic, was basically born under a dark cloud. From its very first day, it wasn't associated with freedom or a new beginning. It was associated with defeat, humiliation, a government that was forced to sign a treaty its own people absolutely despised.
This feeling gave birth to a really poisonous political nickname, the November Criminals. The new democratic leaders were branded as traitors, people who had stabbed the German army in the back. This was a powerful, toxic myth, and it made it almost impossible for the new republic to ever seem legitimate in the eyes of millions of Germans.
All right, let's look at the next domino. A government that starts out humiliated like that is fragile. It really didn't take much to push the Weimar Republic into a state of complete and utter chaos, both politically and economically. The whole political scene was just a battlefield. On one side, you had communist revolutionaries like the Spartacus League who were trying to start a Russian-style revolution. And on the other, you had the new democratic government, which, to survive, had to rely on right-wing militias to crush these uprisings. The result? A bitter, permanent division on the left, which meant there could never be a united front against the growing threat from the far right.
And if all that political chaos wasn't enough, the economy completely fell apart. To try and pay off its massive war debts, the government just started printing more and more money. The result? Something called hyperinflation.
Just take a second to look at these numbers. The speed of the collapse is just breathtaking. In April of 1923, $1 US cost 24,000 German marks. By December, it was nearly 99 million marks. Eventually, the numbers got into the trillions. The country's own money was literally cheaper than wallpaper.
And this is what that looks like for real people. Life savings, pensions, everything you'd worked your entire life for. Poof, gone overnight. Just try to imagine the anxiety, the fear, the sheer desperation. This economic trauma completely shattered the middle class and destroyed any faith people had left in the government.
So, just when it seemed like things couldn't possibly get any worse, well, they did. After a very brief, shaky period of stability that was financed by American loans, the third domino fell. The 1929 Wall Street crash and the Great Depression that came roaring after it.
6 million. By 1932, that was the number of unemployed people in Germany. It's just a staggering number. Those American loans that were propping things up, they dried up overnight. Factories closed. The economy collapsed all over again. Despair was everywhere.
Now, this right here, this shows you the direct political result of all that despair. In 1928, before the big crash, the Nazi Party was just a tiny fringe group, getting less than 3% of the vote. Just 4 years later, in the middle of all that economic ruin, they were the single largest political party in Germany with 37%. The connection is just, it's impossible to ignore.
Into this perfect storm of humiliation, chaos, and economic disaster stepped Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. And they didn't offer complicated economic plans. They offered something much simpler and much more powerful, a promise.
To a nation that felt broken, betrayed, and poor, Hitler promised strength. To a people who felt humiliated, he promised to restore their honor. He promised jobs, he promised stability, and he promised to make Germany great again. It was a message that resonated very, very deeply.
And they delivered this message with a totally new style of politics, one that was built on pure spectacle. These massive rallies, the powerful symbols like the swastika, the salutes, the choreographed applause, all of it was designed to project this overwhelming image of strength and unity, right at a time of weakness and division. It made people feel like they were part of something big and powerful.
And that brings us to the final fatal domino. With the Nazis now the biggest party, traditional conservative politicians made a terrible mistake. They thought they could control Hitler, use his popularity for their own goals. They were so wrong. On January 30th, 1933, they made him chancellor, and the end came with terrifying speed.
What happens next is a chilling example of how a democracy can be taken apart from the inside, using its own laws against itself. First, Hitler gets appointed chancellor. Less than a month later, there's a suspicious fire in the parliament building, and he uses that as the perfect excuse for the fire decree, which basically erased basic civil rights overnight. And then, just a few days after that, comes the killer blow, the Enabling Act. This law gave Hitler the power to rule without parliament. Democracy, in effect, legally voted itself out of existence.
And with that, it was over. The Weimar Republic was dead. In just a few weeks, Germany went from being a deeply flawed democracy to a one-party totalitarian state with the government in complete control of every single aspect of society.
So, what can we learn from all this? The fall of the Weimar Republic shows us what can happen when all those dominoes line up just right. When a nation is drowning in humiliation, shattered by economic crisis, and ripped apart by political chaos, it becomes incredibly vulnerable. It's a stark reminder that democracy isn't guaranteed. It's a fragile system, and it needs constant faith, stability, and our vigilance to survive.